Hello everyone, and welcome to the first part of a series that I will call Disney Why. In this multi-video series, I want to take a look at a bunch of different live-action remakes of beloved Disney original classics while posing the question, what was the justification for this remake? Spoiler warning, the ultimate reason behind every single one of these is of course money, which is earned by exploiting our nostalgia. But I want to explore what the remake does better than the original movie and how the story is improved or updated to modern standards. How can be justified from an artistic standpoint that Disney spends hundreds of millions of dollars on these remakes? What parts do I like? What value do these movies hold? Even if the remake overall isn't good, there still must be some value to it, right? So what I will do today is to look at 4 things Disney was very vocal about during the marketing of the 2020 remake of Mulan. I call these the 4 promises how the remake would be better than the original movie from 1998, which are the following. Number 1, this movie is authentic to Chinese culture and more faithful to the original Ballad of Mulan. Number 2, the movie is more realistic and serious compared to the animated version. Number 3, it's more exciting and adventurous with a focus on action. And number 4, feminism. These visions sound like a pretty good justification for $200 million being spent, I assume, at least on paper. Let's get into my assessment if they achieved what they aimed for. Perhaps the most important strategy during the marketing of this movie was the promise that it would be very faithful to Chinese culture and to the original Ballad of Mulan. I think it's safe to say that it failed. I am not Chinese, but I have heard many Chinese people speak out about this. If you're interested in Chinese history and culture and in how exactly this movie failed so spectacularly, please do yourself a favor and watch this video if you haven't already. I am grateful for the remake in one regard only, and that is how the rage over it birthed this YouTube channel. The main problem is, as far as I can tell, that this movie interpreted many Chinese elements in such an Orientalist way and only showed a surface-level understanding of Chinese culture and mythology. The ideas of qi and witches as the movie presents them are a good example for that. And thus the movie felt very disrespectful to a lot of Chinese viewers.
Because China doesn't have witches. Witch is such a charged word and evokes such a specific idea that it's confusing when you use it in a Chinese context, because the specific idea doesn't exist in Chinese culture. Yet this movie went with the common Western ideal of witch.
But what else do you expect when the people who worked on this movie look like this? Disney, if you want to tell a story that is authentic to Chinese culture and history, hire Chinese people to work on this film. Don't let a white director, white costume designer, and 4 white screenwriters work on it. But it seems representing Chinese culture accurately might have not been the main aspiration of Disney after all. They were just trying to pander to Chinese audiences in order to get that coin from one of the biggest markets on the planet.
Well, the movie is very, very deeply and thoroughly researched at a cultural level.
If you followed the debate this movie sparked when it came out, you have probably seen someone say, so they cut the talking dragon but added this witch lady, we have no songs but villains who walk on walls, and these people do have a point. However, it's not that black and white. It's true that the movie isn't realistic in the sense that it cuts out all the magic and only shows real events. But I think even if you incorporate magic into your movie, the story itself can still feel quote-unquote realistic. Perhaps serious would be a better way to describe what I mean. You can have witches and magical powers and beasts and still write a very serious and grounded story. Just think of Game of Thrones as an example. Westeros is a fantastical land with all sorts of magic in it, but the story itself feels extremely realistic in terms of human characters, their motivations and actions, the internal logic of the world, and how the story unfolds. The key element here is our suspension of disbelief. We need to believe that the magic is part of that world that the film or TV show creates. If we do accept that witches and ice zombies are a part of that world we are diving into, we can immerse ourselves in that story and still find it serious or realistic. For animated movies like the original version of Mulan, it's actually a lot easier for us to believe that talking Eddie Murphy dragons and musical numbers are part of that fictional world. These elements would be harder to believe in a live-action movie. We would probably ask ourselves, is this character really singing right now? Are other characters hearing the song, or do only we as the audience hear it? And so on. Therefore, I don't condemn the choice that the songs Mushu and Cricket were cut in order to have a more serious tone, because especially Mushu, at least the way he was designed in the original, would have stuck out like a sore thumb in this movie, whereas the witch and Mulan's superpowers fit the tone they were trying to aim for better. The question is, did they follow through with their vision of a more serious tone? When I heard that they were going for a more serious approach, I was originally really excited. I thought about what could be achieved with this story of Mulan if it was told for a more mature audience. Maybe we could get a more violent portrayal of war, maybe we would see more death and complex emotions, great characters, epic battle scenes, and a more nuanced exploration of themes like duty, prejudice, or trauma, with gut-wrenching moments and a realness that can be achieved through live-action performances. This movie, despite being marketed as a more mature version of the story, still is targeted at young kids, and that really shows. We don't get a realistic portrayal of war, and the movie is not violent at all. Sure, we see some no-name characters get shot with arrows, which is a bit more violent than seeing animated characters die, yet there is no scene like this.
Tell your emperor to send his strongest armies. I'm ready. How many men does it take to deliver a message? One.
But that's not even the main problem. It's okay that they didn't turn the story of Mulan into a bloody war movie. The problem is, what they show us doesn't feel serious. There are no consequences for anything. The war depicted does not feel dangerous or high stakes or gruesome, and that it's a live action movie doesn't do it any favors, because naturally we don't buy into that story as easily if some aspects of realism miss. The fact that everyone from Mulan's squad makes it out alive after fighting the deadly Rurans and that they don't even get injured are good examples of how the movie fails to make us believe in the war it depicts. Even that I could forgive if the movie somehow still demanded to be perceived as serious. Sadly, that's not the case. So for me, seriousness in film means how serious the events in the fictional world feel to us as viewers. It's irrelevant if they would happen like that in the real world, as long as our suspension of disbelief is not suspended too far, if that makes sense. But that is not the case for the 2020 remake of Mulan, because in that movie, none of the events feel real, because they are not grounded in real emotions we are made to feel as well. None of what happens holds a punch, and we are not invested in the slightest. I have gathered a few scenes of the animated movie to illustrate how much more serious they are in comparison to anything that happens in the live-action remake, even though they might be less quote-unquote realistic. The first one is the entire scene of reflection. Even though Mulan is singing a song about her emotions, what no real person would do, except maybe some theater kids, this scene provokes in us real emotions, and therefore it feels real. We get to understand Mulan as a character, which is something the 2020 version never achieves. It's about themes and painting her as a complex character we can relate to, which makes it grounded in realism or real emotions. The inner struggle Mulan expresses during the song completely misses from the remake, and therefore the new Mulan feels a lot less real to us as a character, because we barely know anything about her and can't relate to what she is going through. I will get more into how the remake failed to make us care about the characters in the next point as well. The next scene is the one in which Mulan decides to take her father's place in the war, which is easily one of the most, if not the most important scene of the movie. In the animated movie, the significance of the decision is supported by the epic soundtrack. We feel the weight of her decision, we know about the possible consequences, and we also understand why she did it. In the remake, the music is very calm at the beginning, and she just suddenly wears the armor and then is gone. There is no build-up, nothing to make us feel for her or understand her thought process. The depiction of their father's reactions after they're gone was also vastly different. Once again, the animated movie succeeded in being emotional and relatable, the remake didn't. And one of the best scenes to illustrate the difference between the animated version and the remake is when they find the village that was burned down by the villains. In the animation, this scene works perfectly with the song right before. We follow these boys who are trying to distract themselves from the realities of the war they are fighting in, until they are confronted with them, which contrasts the horrible incident they witness perfectly, and it makes it much more horrible to us as well. The puppet they find is a subtle way of making us understand the girl she belonged to is dead. Knowing Shang's father died also makes the events more dramatic to us. A character we have been introduced to died. The war feels real, it has consequences, and we are emotionally invested. In the remake, however, Shang doesn't exist, his father doesn't exist, there is no puppet or anything that illustrates to us that the war took real people. I guess my point here is, of course the animated movie feels less realistic because of many reasons, being animated, musical numbers and dragons are a few of them, but story and character-wise it feels more real than the remake ever did. And I don't think the remake even had to be realistic, it just had to be serious, which it wasn't. The problem isn't that they didn't go for realism, the problem is that they failed to make the fictional and in parts magical world feel real to us, and that there were barely any scenes that demanded us to feel real emotions.
But as far as the action sequences went, it turns out I was not out of my comfort zone. I was right in my comfort zone. I didn't even realize that I would fall into being an action director as easily as I did.
I'm sorry to say that, but the action is not great. Just as an example, answer me this. Which scene feels more exciting to you?
You took away my victory!
No! I did.
Making it live action, they could have had really cool cinematography, they could have made the fight scenes gripping and exciting. The only real war scene in this movie is so underwhelming and the rest of the fights are boring as well. You could argue that is because the movie is made for children, but even if your target audience are young children, there is no excuse for scenes like this. The movie was at best boring to look at and at worst confusing and laughable. And one really important thing that the screenwriters seem to have missed, a movie becomes adventurous and exciting when the audience is invested. But for that to happen, we need to care about the characters. Even if there was a really well choreographed and well executed action scene, which this movie has none of, that wouldn't really matter if I don't give a shit who wins or who dies. This is actually one of the movie's biggest sins. The audience doesn't care about any, and I mean about any character. Please tell me if you had a different experience, but while I was watching the movie, I was so indifferent to all of them. The movie didn't give me anything that made me invested in the character stories or that made me even like them. Our protagonist is this watered down, uninteresting and dull Mulan, played by an actress that looks like this after someone has sacrificed themselves for her. And there are a bunch of soulless shadows of characters that somewhat resemble the characters from the original, but aren't likable or interesting or really have no personality at all. The friends Mulan makes during the training are irrelevant and there is no emotional connection between them. We don't even care about Mulan's family, which should be the emotional center of this story. The commander and emperor were unbelievably uninteresting and the villain was boring as well, and he wasn't threatening in the slightest. One example of how the movie failed to make us care about the characters would be the comparison of Shang in the animated movie and Hong Hui in the remake. It was such a stupid decision to cut Shang, a well-beloved character by many, and replace him with someone we don't care for. Hong Hui even was the most likable character for me, but the screenwriters felt to make him multidimensional and someone the audience would want to follow or root for. I realized what big of a difference there is in the introduction of these two characters alone. Let's look at all the things we learn about Shang in his very first scene. He is filled with pride once his father makes him captain, and he expresses his desire to prove that he's capable of fulfilling his duty. He has to conceal his excitement, which makes him really likable. We know that his father is a high-ranking military general, and he tells us that his son was #1 in class and has extensive knowledge of training techniques. We also later get to see how skilled Shang really is. We get to learn about Shang's aspirations once he's alone for a moment, and he imagines how he becomes the leader of China's finest troops. After his father leaves, we get to see him act as captain. He is strict but fair, and he remains very poised, although the Imperial Administrator guy tries to bring him down. Which brings me to the most important part. This scene gives us reason to care for Shang. Not only because he's likable, but we are made to feel empathy for him due to the situation he's in. We tend to care for characters which are at a disadvantage, and Shang clearly is in an uncomfortable situation. He has to train this spineless, pale, pathetic lot. He needs to make his father proud. He has to step up to the Imperial Administrator, and we want him to succeed. We want him to make soldiers out of these idiots. And there's even one more thing. We see how Shang worries about his father once he rides off into war, and we don't want his father to die. Even though their interaction was very brief, we know what his father means to Shang. To compare that with Hong Hui, all I could get from his first scene was that he tried to help Mulan when she fell to the ground, which shows he's a nice person, I guess. And then they both draw swords at each other, and he obeys the commander's order very quickly when the commander separates him and Mulan. What completely misses in this scene, and in any other scene with him, is a reason for us to care for this character. We don't really learn any new things about him, he doesn't evolve. The one relationship he has, the one with Mulan, is really clumsily written and there is just nothing to root or to care for. Shang has more growth and character during I'll Make a Man Out of You than Hong Hui has in the entire movie. To come back to the actual point I want to make here, how could the movie be adventurous and exciting if we don't care who makes it out alive? The 2020 remake of Mulan falls into the same trap that recent movies like Captain Marvel or the latest Star Wars trilogy have fallen into as well, which is women on screen, in order to be the strong female character, apparently need to be perfect from the start and can't make any mistakes. While Luke trained hard to become a mighty Jedi, Rey is just the most powerful from the start. Captain Marvel just has to let go of inhibitions to be the most powerful person ever, and Mulan, being basically a superhero since she was a child, just has to stop hiding her chi in order to be the mightiest warrior. Mulan in the animated version obviously didn't have any superpowers. She had to work her ass off and use her natural abilities to her advantage in order to survive the war. She was introduced to us as an inventive character that used her wits to work efficiently from the start, and that's what allowed her to succeed. The new Mulan is just the baddest bitch ever and not like other girls. She is weirdly contrasted with her sister, which is also added in the remake in order to make her look cooler, I guess, which I found pretty unnecessary. To be fair, I can see what the filmmakers were going for with the concept of stop hiding who you are and you become stronger once you stop lying to yourself. That's a nice idea. Yes, we should be true to who we are, and I believe that will make us stronger. However, this was just horribly executed in such an uninspired, on-the-nose kind of way. And secondly, that is, once again, nothing the original movie didn't already do, and also did better. Mulan in the animated version is just a girl on the search for a place where she fits in. She doesn't fit into the role society and her family had planned for her, but she still didn't give off the not like other girls vibe. Her entire thing is that she desperately tries to be like the other girls at the beginning. She then joins the army and finds out that she also doesn't fit into this male-centered field by mimicking everyone around her. Instead, only when she tries things in her own way, she succeeds. She uses her talents and her wit to her advantage, which is simultaneously a more feminine solution in a male-centric field, and thus she wins. It's also so gratifying to see other soldiers adopt her way of fighting. Mulan in the animated version is also allowed to fail. At first, she's horrible at training, she's bad at adapting to these new surroundings, which makes her development that much more gratifying to see. Cutting the theme of blooming late, taking time to find one's place in the world, and the theme of reflection was also a crime. Mulan's conflict in the animated version is how she sees herself, hence reflection, and how her perception of herself changes, how she grows and she becomes the person she wants to be. This is much more powerful and heartfelt than the new Mulan, who already would know her place and who knows who she is from the start, but it's the world who doesn't let her be who she wants to be, until they kind of do, without any reason. And there's also this scene which completely misses in the remake.
Maybe I didn't go for my father. Maybe what I really wanted was to prove I could do things right. So when I looked in the mirror, I'd see someone worthwhile. But I was wrong. I see nothing.
This Mulan is fallible, she is multi-layered, and she fails. She isn't perfect and just feels like an actual human being. Believe it or not, but women are just human beings. Disney's attempt to turn its heroines into superhuman badasses is so sad. Please, let these characters be badasses. I love to see women kick ass, but make them characters first. We don't want shallow fighting machines that can't do no wrong, but instead full-fledged characters that we can identify with, that inspire us, that feel more realistic, and from a storytelling standpoint, that are just interesting to follow. Having no character arc, not failing at anything, and learning nothing means we don't connect with these characters, and thus we aren't interested in these stories. And to think that female characters have to be perfect in order to be strong or a role model is really fucked up. We should allow women to be portrayed with the same range of humanness as male characters are. I quickly want to talk about the witch too. She could have been an interesting character, but she was so underused and she died in the most unnecessary way. And while I think it's nice that there is this female camaraderie and understanding between the two, having the witch who was introduced as this super powerful being just sacrifice herself for Mulan when there would have been so many better solutions for the situation seems like a dumb cop-out because the screenwriters wanted her to die. And it's definitely not as empowering as they might have thought it was. Selflessness is a good trait to have, but to let the literally strongest character of the movie die like that is weird. Now that we got all of this out of the way, I will do a quick round of what else the movie sucked in, because I want to let out some of that anger that has built up while working on this video. Mulan's father's narration was unnecessary and annoying. The humor is so dumb and doesn't work at all. The CGI wasn't even good, the wigs were bad, and overall the movie wasn't as visually pleasing as it could have been. The dialogues were cringy and just bad. The Phoenix, which was the replacement for Mushu, was so pointless. Every time it was shown on screen, I became more furious. The movie was too long overall. The relationship between Mulan and Huanghui was so badly written and incoherent. I missed the grandma so badly. Using instrumental versions of the old songs and using quotes of the original felt perverted. It was a cheap way to make us feel nostalgic and to exploit our positive feelings about Mulan, and I hated it. The movie has no right to use that. Be your own fucking thing and be good at it. Don't rely on our nostalgia. In fact, nothing is earned. There are so many moments that purely rely on our nostalgia. I don't know if it was the direction or the script or just the actor's fault, but many performances, not only the lead actresses, were not good. The father-daughter relationship was so unemotional and lacked depth compared to the original. I hated that they made the villain still cartoonish and somehow a lot less frightening than the one in the original version. The transition of scenes and overall progression of events are really disjointed. And lastly, cutting out Bai Shang was a sin. Honestly, every 5 seconds of this movie I could have hit pause and write a 3-page long essay about what else I hated. You could ask, are there even any things about this movie that I liked? Well, it should be a given, but at least they hired only Chinese actors to play these Chinese characters. And some sets were really beautiful. And I liked the witch's actress, but sadly the script didn't do her many favors. They kept none of the promises that were made. The movie is disrespectful to Chinese culture when it would have been an amazing opportunity to portray this marginalized culture in an authentic and respectful way for Western audiences. The movie was boring and ridiculous. None of the advantages of live action movies were used, like good performances, exciting action, beautiful cinematography. Instead, they still copied a lot of elements from the animated version and cut out other important stuff without showing any understanding of how live action and animated movies work. And they also completely failed to be more feminist or empowering. But would the movie be justified if they had followed through with the promises they made? Yes, absolutely. Especially for me personally, if they had expanded some of the themes we see in the original movie. Retellings in general are not inherently bad. People have done it for literally millennia. I love to see how stories evolve over time and how different storytellers interpret them in a new light or add their own spin on the story. But if you do a remake, don't make it a weirder and worse copy of another thing. Make it your own, with just as much care and love and an understanding of how stories work, and an understanding whose place it is to tell these stories, which this movie clearly did not. It just tried to capitalize on our nostalgia. There is one more thing I want to say. You might have heard of the controversy this movie provoked not only by being extremely bad, but by filming in Xinjiang, a region in China, and thanking it in the credits when it's widely known that the Chinese government has imprisoned hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Uyghurs, a Muslim minority, in so-called re-education camps in Xinjiang. This whole situation is not talked about enough, and there are so many horrific and disgusting things going on at this moment that I could fill a whole video talking about it. The stories survivors tell about these camps are unbelievably horrendous. There are also mosques being destroyed by the Chinese government, and Xinjiang was turned into a police state where the Uyghurs and other minority groups are under constant surveillance. The goal is to destroy their language, their religion, and entire culture, and to turn them into loyal and good citizens of China. I have linked some websites and videos that talk about everything that is going on at the moment, and there's another link to a website where you can donate to support the Uyghurs. So that wraps it up for today, everyone. I hope you had a little bit of fun, even if I had to be serious for a moment there. Tell me all your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please think about leaving a like. I plan to do this style of video for the remakes of Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, and Cinderella too, but maybe I will discuss other movies as well, especially looking at the fact that there are more remakes in the making. So if you're interested in my thoughts on these as well, you can subscribe to my channel.